The movie starts with Purnama, a girl, and a vacation. Purnama was told a month ago that she had cancer and that she would die at the age of 18. Purnama was fortunate enough to have the cancer detected early, and following medical attention, she made a full recovery and was released from the hospital. Purnama made the spontaneous decision to travel in celebration of her newfound existence. Just so happened to be the location of a well-liked camping area. Popular railway line had just opened, slicing through the heart of a forest park. The train operator presented a special promotion to encourage this journey. Riders on the maiden excursion would receive free activities at the campsite for 24 hours. Buying tickets and running to the station, which was bustling with celebratory passengers, Purnama and her sister Kembang were excited. The train slowly moves into Forest Park while the crowd watches, but the passengers are unaware that they are traveling on a death train. As soon as the train left the station and descended into the forest, some of the passengers had already pulled out their cameras and begun snapping shots of the breathtaking panorama that stretched as far as the eye could see. A traveler by the name of Ramla stood amid the crowd, looking confused and clutching a photo. She looked at the picture of her spouse and tears filled her eyes. Her husband had vanished inexplicably a few months prior while employed by this railway. After reporting it to the police right away, both Ramla and the train company did not find him in the forest, even after months of searching. The police were reluctant to carry out a comprehensive search because of the potentially deadly fauna in the forest. Ramla purchased a rail ticket, determined to find her husband. Ramla was drowned in grief when she looked away and spotted her husband driving a far-off automobile. Startled, she quickly moved from her seat to the aisle, but when she arrived, he had already left. Ramla noticed her spouse had entered the front compartment just as she was starting to wonder. Ramla discovers her spouse oddly absent when she arrives at this carriage. Perplexed, she inquired with a train attendant. However, they maintained that there was no individual wearing a blue uniform there. Ramla was stunned by the abrupt presence. Maybe she's having hallucinations because she misses her husband so much. She had no idea that the terror was only getting started. Darkness enveloped the train as it moved through the forest and into Tunnel 5. The passengers became restless because they could not see the surroundings. The train crew then observed that the door to cabin 5 seemed to be broken on the video feed. To look at the matter, the conductor dispatched a repair technician. The cabin's power supply abruptly stopped as the worker arrived. Assuming that a circuit had tripped, the worker turned to examine the fuse box and saw something horrifying. Before anyone could respond, the train made an odd hissing sound from underneath, and the final cabin mysteriously broke apart and was left behind in the dimly lit tunnel. Purnama and Kembang had just returned from using the lavatory when they realized the train cabin was missing. Bewildered, Purnama located staff member Tekken without any delay. Tekken was equally perplexed to see that a cabin had gone missing. Just as he was ready to report to the conductor, another man took notice of the unusual circumstances. When other passengers heard the man's query, they realized something wasn't quite right. Tekken was forced to admit that cabin 5's malfunctioning linkage might have been left in the tunnel. The passengers assumed it was a common malfunction and didn't give it much thought after hearing Tekken's explanation. The conductor was perplexed when Tekken reported the missing cabin to him right away. The linking mechanisms of the train are locked, though, so how might any of the carriages be deliberately disengaged? Thinking back to the last malfunction, he wondered if the maintenance guy had unintentionally hit the release switch while fixing it. As Tekken attempted to report the event, the conductor gave him instructions to quiet the passengers. But when he answered the phone, he discovered that the connection had been inexplicably severed. The train subsequently made its way into Tunnel 4. Upon entering the tunnel, an odd sound of laughter reverberated throughout the cabin. The man was suddenly choked and attempted to get help without waiting for the other passengers to react. He felt pressure all over his body. A fellow traveler attempted to assist but experienced the same feeling as if he were being choked. The other passengers were horrified by the odd scene. When a journalist looked up to try to get a picture of the moment for the camera, he saw that a woman was hanging from the ceiling. The woman seemed like a local from a tribal village because of her simple clothing. She abruptly raced forward the journalist as he attempted to take a picture of her. The surviving passengers became aware that something was seriously wrong as they witnessed the man's terrible death. However, it was too late. They were all immobile and kept in place by an enigmatic force. Purnama and Kembang were moved to Cabin 3 as a result of the mysterious separation of Cabin 5. Kembang saw a horrific scenario when Tekken located the sisters and was ready to give an explanation. To the surprise of all, Cabin 4 got lost in the tunnel. The oddity was also observed by other diners on the train. Tekken clarified that they have reported the train malfunction. A car from the company will be sent to the rescue. But the odd happenings were far from ended. This carriage is fit for an aristocrat. If a rich man found out, that would be terrible. He used a tissue to swiftly wipe the moss clean. The official confronted the conductor aggressively, believing that he had made a mistake. The conductor argued that this wasn't the case and that every cabin had been completely cleaned before leaving. Purnama and the others in Cabin 3 saw a pattern, though a cabin would disappear every time the train went through a tunnel. Purnama had a suspicion that the autos were being secretly detached. The wealthy passenger's cabin number 2 was inaccessible without paying an additional cost, thus the passengers decided not to go to the front cabins. A few chose to wait in the aisle rather than pay the fee. Purnama and Ramla unwillingly paid for the upgrade out of fear of additional unusual happenings, and the three of them went into Cabin 2. When common travelers entered the aristocratic cabin, a wealthy woman gave them a contemptuous glance. The train entered Tunnel 3 at that point, and strange things started to happen again. A cry was heard by the people waiting in the aisle, and then there was the sound of severe destruction. Upon turning around, they discovered that Cabin 3 was in utter disorder and that the attendants had inexplicably disappeared. The travelers attempted to go to Cabin 2 after realizing something was off, but they were stopped by a strange force. Just as they were about to respond, a woman emerged from the ceiling. It was only after they saw the terrible demise of the attendants that Purnama realized why the cabins were going missing. Cabin 3 separates from the train without waiting for Tekken to open the door, leaving the carriages in the tunnel and the throng able to just observe. Tekken raced to the conductor and demanded that they halt the train right now. He thought that the weird happenings would end as long as they stayed out of tunnels. Just as the conductor was going to alert the driver, the head of the department entered Cabin 2. In addition to ordering the train to not be stopped, he also declared Tekken, Purnama, and the others to be thieves since they were spreading fear in order to steal the aristocratic cabin. The affluent travelers grew agitated upon hearing this. When a wealthy man busts open a bottle of wine, mayhem breaks out in the carriage. Ramla cried out of the increased strain and gestured to another tunnel that was up ahead. When the authority noticed the tunnel, he or she silently withdrew to Cabin 1. He shut the door behind him out of concern that the occupants of Cabin 2 would follow. The train rolled into the tunnel, passing unseen by the struggling passengers. Tekken was being beaten by a fellow passenger when the power in the cabin abruptly went out. The woman with the vines covering her returned to the passengers' confused stares. She instantly killed a passenger with a single scream. Purnama attempted to flee to Cabin 1 with the others while hiding in the aisle, but they were unable to do so since the door was closed. Those who were still in Cabin 2 perished in an instant, even if the conductor was able to open the door. There were only the locomotive and Cabin 1 left out of the original 5 cabins as the train came out of the tunnel. The sky was getting darker at the same time. An altercation ensued when the conductor tried to stop the train by approaching the driver, but the person in authority would not allow it to happen. They were able to restrain the official and stop the train at the entrance to Tunnel 1 with the assistance of the passengers. Suspecting that the official knew something, the irate passengers demanded an explanation of what was going on. The official eventually admitted the truth when pressured to do so. It came out that they had cleared a significant amount of the forest during the railway construction in order to make as much money as possible. The nearby villages objected to the railway corporation, voicing their opposition to the destruction. A villager informed the official that the forest was home to an evil spirit and that any harm done to it would infuriate it. However, the supervisor had no faith in these spectral tales and, with a great wave of his hand, the bulldozer entered the jungle. Strange incidents had beset the railway ever since. Ramla's husband was among the many laborers who had been brutally murdered while building a few months prior. The authorities buried the strangeness, saying that Ramla's husband and others were involved in an accident during construction so as not to interfere with the opening. Nevertheless, the wicked spirit returned for retribution as soon as the railway opened. After hearing the person in charge's explanation, everyone realized that waiting would not be an option and that everything might remain as it is. They made the decision to ask for assistance because they thought the weird happenings were limited to the tunnels. They planned to walk over the tunnel to the resort where they could phone the police for assistance in order to receive assistance. But as soon as the group disembarked from the train, they were met with a terrifying sight. The demonic spirit materialized at the tunnel's entrance. She let out a snarl, and a great deal of vines spread out all around her. Several of the small group vanished in the blink of an eye. Everyone was running in all directions, terrified, but the terrible spirit controlled the entire forest. To what place could they possibly flee? The trial of those left in charge of the train soon began after the dispersed throng were pulled away by the vines. When the bad spirit pinches the person in charge's head, they promptly pass away. When Purnama and Kembang heard the screams coming from the forest, they were only able to shake in a corner. However, Purnama noticed that Kembang had turned into a ghost as she turned around. Purnama felt something stopping her as she sought to flee in a panic. Her corpse was ensnared in vines. Purnama was in a state of confusion when she heard Kembang calling to her. Glancing up, she noticed that Kembang had transformed into a massive tree. Kembang was being quickly consumed by the tree, and in an instant she was a part of it. The dead passengers changed into trees and blocked the railway at the same moment as the mountain tunnel collapsed. The vines surrounding Purnama abruptly withdrew, and the evil spirit disappeared into the jungle just as she was about to become food for others. To ensure you never miss any updates on new videos, kindly click the bell icon, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.